Before today's video starts, we want to bring you a quick word from our sponsor, Amino. If you do not already have Amino, you have to check it out, because we're creating exclusive material that you can only find on Amino. Amino is an amazing social media app that has communities about nearly every topic imaginable. Recently, Amino launched this amazing new feature called Stories. Stories allow users to create short narrative videos, and Criminally Listed is making exclusive material for Amino Stories. In our latest story, we cover the bone-chilling 1974 unsolved murder of Cindy Williams. And the only way you can watch this story is on the Amino app. Amino is free and is available on both iOS and Android. You can find our story about Cindy Williams in our profile by following the link in the description box below the video. Or you can search for our profile on the Amino app. Our username is Criminally Listed. Make sure you follow us and press the button for notifications because we'll be doing more stories in the future. So please download Amino today and check out our latest story, and don't forget to follow us so you can watch upcoming stories. Number 3. Shannon Hercutt. Shannon Hercutt lived in Sevierville, Tennessee. She was a successful realtor and she owned a business that rented out cabins. Shannon was also an active member of her community. She was a driving force in getting a large playground installed in one of the city's parks. On August 3, 2009, the police were notified to an OnStar alert that Shannon's 2007 Cadillac Escalade had been involved in an accident. The police went to the area where the alert came from, and they found Shannon's SUV at the bottom of a cliff. It was too late to help 40-year-old Shannon Hercutt. She was already dead. At first, Shannon's death was ruled an accident. Then 11 days later, the police announced that Shannon's death was actually a homicide. The change in status came because of what they found at Shannon's home and the autopsy results. The police first visited Shannon's home 3 days after she was found dead. Inside her home, they found broken bottles, a baseball bat, and there was blood splattered on the refrigerator. The police have never made the cause of death public, but Shannon's family has said that they believe she was beaten to death with a baseball bat. After she was killed in her home, she was then placed into the SUV and driven out to the cliff. Her body was then placed in the driver's seat, and then the SUV was guided over the cliff. One of the early suspects in the case was Shannon's own father, Ted Hercutt. However, Ted had an alibi. At the time of the murder, Ted was in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina with his wife, his other daughter, Penny, who is also Shannon's sister, and his grandchild. In the 3 months after the murder, no arrests were made. Then 3 months after the murder, someone fired a gun at Shannon's business. No one was hurt, but the front window was broken. The police never discovered who shot at the business or if it was connected to Shannon's murder. Then in 2014, 5 years after the killing, Shannon's sister, Penny, and her father, Ted, appeared on the Dr. Phil show. The show aired in January 2015. On the show, Penny accused Ted of hiring someone to kill Shannon. Penny said that Ted and Shannon had been fighting at the time of Shannon's murder. She also said that Ted wanted to take over Shannon's business. Ted adamantly denied being involved in his daughter's murder. Ted said that even before Shannon's death was ruled a homicide, he did not think it was an accident. Because of his belief that it wasn't an accident, he pushed for an autopsy. He asked Penny why would he ask for an autopsy if he was involved in her murder. Ted admitted that he was a suspect, but the sheriff's department had cleared him. If Ted was involved with the murder of his daughter, he took that information with him to the grave. He died in November 2017 at the age of 70. The police have never found any evidence that he was involved in the murder of his daughter. Many family members, including his own daughter and Shannon's sister, Penny, are convinced that he hired someone to beat Shannon to death. They think he was a pathological liar who was obsessed with money. A reward is being offered for information leading to an arrest in Shannon's murder. Unfortunately, at the time of this video, the murder of Teresa Hercutt is considered cold. Number 2. Willie McRae. Willie McRae was born in May 1923 in Scotland. During World War II, he served in the Royal Indian Navy. After the war, he went to university and he got a degree in law. He eventually became a lawyer. As a lawyer, he helped write Israel's maritime laws. Back in Scotland, he was a devoted member of the Scottish National Party. McRae was strongly against nuclear energy, and he worked hard to advocate against it. McRae also had some habits that made him seem larger than life. For example, he supposedly smoked 80 unfiltered cigarettes a day. He could also consume a large amount of alcohol, but he never appeared to be drunk. In April 1985, McRae was 61 years old. On the evening of April 4th, McRae was out with his godson and returned to his flat in Glasgow, which was on the top floor of a building. McRae had never married and he had no children, so he lived alone. Early the next morning, two of his neighbors noticed that his flat was on fire. One of the neighbors got into McRae's flat and found him passed out. The fire department arrived a few minutes later and they put the fire out. McRae woke up and he declined medical attention. He said that he had fallen asleep with a lit cigarette in bed. He said that his clothes caught fire, so he took them off and placed them in the bathtub. But then the bathtub caught fire. McRae said he eventually passed out from smoke inhalation. McRae spent the day in his fire-damaged flat, and he was visited by his business partner, Ronnie Welsh. That evening at about 6:30, McRae got into his Volvo 244 and he set off for his cottage, which was near the small fishing village of Dorney, which was about 170 miles from his flat. Somewhere along the way, McRae got a flat tire. He took off the tire and put it in the back seat. He then put on the spare tire and continued on his journey. The next morning, at about 10 o'clock, two Australian tourists happened upon McRae's car about 25 miles from his cottage. It was banged up, and it was straddling a stream of water about 90 feet from a junction. The tourists were able to flag down the car. In the car was a doctor, her fiancé, and David Coots, who was a member of the Scottish National Party. Coots knew McRae because they were both members of the Scottish National Party. They all rushed to McRae's crashed car. In the driver's seat, they found McRae bleeding from his right temple. The doctor determined that he was still alive. They all noticed that McRae's hands were folded and they were in his lap. They also noted that McRae wasn't wearing a seatbelt. McRae was rushed to the hospital. Everyone just assumed that McRae had been involved in a single car accident and he hit his head. Then about 6 hours after he arrived at the hospital, a nurse noticed a gunshot wound in his right temple. McRae was given an x-ray and they discovered that there was a bullet in his brain. At 3:30 the next morning, McRae, who was 61 years old, was pronounced dead. By the time the authorities realized he had been shot, his car had been taken away. Also, there had been heavy rain and several people had trampled over the scene. So the scene was heavily compromised. A gun was found, but it was not found anywhere near where the car had crashed. It was apparently found 40 to 50 feet from the car. McRae had been shot once, but the gun had been fired twice. The gun raised several questions regarding the crash site. McRae was found with his hands folded in his lap. If he shot himself, the recoil would have probably pushed his right hand out of the car window. If that is the case, then how did McRae's hands end up folded in his lap? Also, if McRae shot himself, how did the gun end up so far from the crash site? If he shot himself in the head, there would have been no way he would have been able to throw the gun away from the car. Something else that is important to note is that the gun had no fingerprints on it. Also, there is no real evidence that McRae ever owned a gun. However, one person did claim that McRae owned a gun. That was his business partner, Ronnie Welsh. Welsh had visited McRae on the day that his flat caught fire. In the years since the shooting, Welsh has only given one interview. The interview happened 10 years after the shooting. In the interview, Welsh said he did not think that McRae shot himself. After the interview, Welsh has stayed out of the public eye. Some people think that he has disappeared, either voluntarily or someone made him disappear. His current whereabouts are unknown. Besides the gun, there were other odd things regarding the crash site. For example, McRae was a heavy smoker and he always had a carton of cigarettes with him. He also always carried his briefcase with him. But there were no cigarettes in his car and his briefcase has never been found. To this day, it's unknown if McRae shot himself or if he was murdered. If he was murdered, then who killed him and why did they kill him? One theory is that the Israeli Secret Service, the Mossad, was responsible for the murder. Other people think that McRae's personal life is what led to his murder. Notably, there were rumors that he was gay. But there is no evidence that he was gay, nor is there any evidence that he was killed because of his lifestyle. Another theory is that McRae was killed because of a book he was supposedly writing at the time of his death. McRae, who was an anti-nuclear advocate, was writing a tell-all book about the British nuclear industry. Some people think that he was murdered to silence him. Another theory proposes that members of MI5 killed him. Other people speculate that McRae was killed by a drug cartel that was dealing drugs in the area. These are just a few of the theories surrounding McRae's death, but it's not even clear if he was murdered or if he died by suicide. Willie McRae's death remains one of Scotland's most elusive mysteries, and it does not seem likely that the questions surrounding his death will ever be answered. Number 1. Aileen Conway. April 29, 1986 was a warm, clear day in the Lawton, Oklahoma area. At around 10:40 a.m., a farmer just outside the city noticed some smoke wafting into the air from a nearby country road. The farmer called the Oklahoma Highway Patrol, and a patrolman arrived in the area 20 minutes later. He discovered that the smoke was coming from a car that had slammed into the guardrail of a deserted bridge. The fire was so intense that the car and the guardrail were melting together. Despite the intensity of the fire, the patrolman could see that there was a person in the driver's seat. But it was too late to do anything to help them. The fire department was called, and they put out the fire. More patrolmen arrived, and they looked at the skid marks on the road. They thought that when the car collided with the guardrail, it was traveling at a speed of around 50 to 60 miles per hour. The body in the car was burned beyond recognition. The police discovered that the car belonged to Pat Conway. Pat lived in Lawton with his 50-year-old wife, Aileen. They had been married for 33 years, and they had 4 daughters and 3 sons together. The police concluded that the body in the car was Aileen's. At first, the police ruled the death an accident, but Pat wasn't convinced it was an accident because of some oddities he found around the home. When Aileen was killed, Pat wasn't home. He returned home a few hours after the car was found crashed into the guardrail. When he got home, he found the patio door open. In the backyard, the garden hose was on, and the water was going into the pool. Inside the house, Pat found Aileen's purse. Inside her purse were her driver's license and eyeglasses. Pat thought that this was odd because Aileen always took her purse with her. He was also pretty sure she wouldn't drive without her license or her glasses. Also, the ironing board was set up and the iron was still on. In the ensuite of the master bedroom, the bathtub was full of water. Finally, the phone in the master bedroom was off the hook. Pat thought that the disarray around the home was evidence that Aileen had been kidnapped. Pat thinks that Aileen tried to call for help, and this is why the phone was found off the hook. Pat thought that the area where Aileen's body was found was further proof that she had been kidnapped. Aileen was found in the car 15 miles from their home, but Pat was sure that he and Aileen had never been in that area before. What Pat knew for sure was that there was no reason for Aileen to be on that road on that day. All these oddities convinced Pat to call an investigator with the district attorney's office named Ray Anderson. At first, Anderson was doubtful. Anderson thought that Pat may have been just trying to find a way to explain his wife's death in a way that wasn't just a senseless accident. But after listening to Pat, Anderson thought it was possible that Aileen may have been a victim of foul play. Anderson and Pat went to the crash site a few days after Aileen was killed. About 200 feet from the bridge, they found a church bulletin. Pat recognized the bulletin. It had been sitting on the dashboard of the car. It had not been damaged by the fire. Once again, Pat thought that this was unusual. Whenever it was warm, Aileen drove with the windows up and the air conditioning on. Pat said she never drove with the windows down. Pat and Anderson thought that the bulletin was proof that the car had been stopped and the door was opened. If the windows were closed, this was the only way the bulletin could have flew out of the car. Anderson thought that while Aileen was in the driver's seat, someone pressed down on the accelerator and put it into drive, and then the car slammed into the guardrail. Another possibility is that Aileen was dead, and her limp foot was placed onto the gas pedal, and then the car was put into drive. Anderson thought that the killer was hoping the car would go into the creek, but instead, it slammed into the bridge. When that happened, the killer decided to torch the car to cover up any evidence of the murder and any clues that may have led to their identity. Because of all the oddities surrounding the case, Anderson convinced the district attorney's office to change the death from an accident to unexplained. Anderson then had the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation and the state fire marshal investigate Aileen's death. Sonny Sampson from the state fire marshal's office also noticed some oddities with the crash. Parts inside the car, like the seats and the dashboard, were covered with fire-retardant material. So Sampson was surprised at the extensive damage caused by the fire. Because of the amount of damage inside the car, he thought it was possible that the inside of the car had been doused with gasoline and then it was set on fire. Several informal tests were conducted. Sampson and other investigators got pieces of a dashboard and parts of a seat that were similar to Aileen's dashboard and seats. Then they burned the material with a blowtorch. When the blowtorch was removed from the material, the fire went out. But when the same material was doused with gasoline, they became completely engulfed in flames. Sampson also learned that the gas cap from Aileen's car was missing and has never been found. Sampson said that in cases of arson involving cars, often the gas cap is removed so that the fire burns more quickly. This led Sampson to believe that the fire was an act of arson. If Aileen was murdered, why was she killed? She was a church-going 50-year-old wife and mother of 7. She didn't have any enemies, and there is no evidence that she was leading some type of double life. One theory is that she interrupted a burglary. It's possible that the killer or killers didn't know anyone was home when he, she, or they broke into the home. An investigator with the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation said that in the weeks and months before Aileen died, there had been several burglaries in the Conway's neighborhood. So the authorities think it is possible that Aileen was killed by someone or several people who she caught robbing her home. But why would the killer or killers go to all the trouble of either kidnapping or killing Aileen and then moving her body and then drive 15 miles away and then stage a car accident in broad daylight? It would have been much easier to kill her and leave her in the home. Also, the Conway's home showed no signs of a break-in or robbery. Pat Conway was convinced that his wife Aileen was murdered, and he vowed to spend the rest of his life looking for answers. Unfortunately, Pat died in August 2013 at the age of 81, without ever knowing if his wife's death was the result of a car accident or if she was the victim of foul play. Thanks a lot for watching today's video. Hopefully you found it interesting. If you did, please subscribe for more videos just like it, and please give us a thumbs up. Also, please go to criminallylisted.com where you can suggest cases, buy merch, and find out about exclusive podcasts. But that is all for today. Thank you again for watching.